In the 2024 Player's Handbook, fighters, paladins, rangers, barbarians, and rogues got a wonderful new way to expand their options with their weapons in the form of the Mastery properties.
Weapon Masteries are brand new to the 2024 rules, and they really make your choice of weapons stand out. But some of the options stand out a little bit more than others. So today we are going to tier rank all of the Weapon Masteries and discuss what we love or don't love about them and how they stack up against each other. There's a lot to discuss today, so let's get rolling.
This week's episode of our show is sponsored by our wonderful friends at Hitpoint Press and their latest project, Humblewood Beyond the Canopy.
For years, we have enjoyed Humblewood's vibrant world where they bring animal and bird folk to life to go on epic 5e adventures. And now, their sequel to the award-winning Humblewood campaign setting is now on Kickstarter.
This is such a wonderful and magical world. I think it combines so much optimism and nostalgia and really cool themes of like little woodland creatures dealing with the environment and their big world around them, and really cool but also positive-minded conflicts that I think really make Humblewood such a special setting.
As a kid who grew up reading Redwall and watching movies like The Secret of Nim or Watership Down, those sorts of tales were really instilled in me as a kid. And so Humblewood has always been an exciting place to tell stories.
Their new project, Humblewood Beyond the Canopy, is a brand new standalone setting guide with a globe-trotting adventure for 5th edition that takes you beyond the original Humblewood and out into the vast continent of the West End. There are frozen mysteries in the Crystal Expanse. There are mighty Gargaths across the plains of Fimbelt. And there are also warm warrens that you can shelter away from the Stormcrag in. It's really cool to see this setting spread out and grow in such a wonderful and organic fashion.
And if you haven't jumped into Humblewood before, this campaign setting book is standalone. It does not require the first Humblewood book to play. But if you are a seasoned Humblewood player, you can easily continue your adventures from the first book into this new one. It's compatible with both the 2014 and 2024 rules.
And there's 6 brand new playable animal and bird ancestries inspired by cats, parrots, geckos, and more, and a new gadgeteer class, which is a new spin on crafting and tinkering for player characters with new subclasses, subraces, backgrounds, spells, and so much more good stuff for players and DMs alike.
So make sure to check out Humblewood Beyond the Canopy at humblewood2.com, or you can click the link in our description below.
Best of all, if you support the campaign, you'll be helping bringing Kelly and myself to the world of Humblewood as well.
We have been talking to the people at Humblewood for some time, and we've always been excited about the idea of writing for Humblewood, and now's the time that gets to happen. If we unlock the stretch goals, Monty and I will be writing an adventure for this book.
Oh, yeah, and you might be like, the Drakkenheim guys with all their eldritch horror and dark fantasy writing a Humblewood adventure? Oh yeah, we're gonna get a little bit dark, but
Still Humblewood.
Still Humblewood.
Yeah.
But that's that. So we're gonna write a short adventure as a stretch goal for the project. So your support will help make that possible. So the links are right down below.
And now, on to this week's episode.
As a quick recap over how we like to do these rankings on our channel, starting from the bottom up, the D tier option tends to be where we rank something that might be a little bit of a trap. Going with a D tier option means that it might feel like in a lot of cases you just aren't benefiting from the feature at all, aren't benefiting from your weapon choice. It's just something that might even be detracting. Like you could have chosen something else, but you chose this, and your character is a little weaker for it.
The C tier is a niche option. In the terms of the Weapon Masteries, this often means that it's just something that isn't going to come up as often as a lot of the other options. There's probably better options out there. Oftentimes, a C tier in this case might mean that when the option does come up, it's great, but it just isn't coming up enough.
B tier is a really solid ranking, and it means that the option often depends on the character build or it just doesn't have the same high level of potential as higher ranked options. B tier is rock solid. It's a decent weapon mastery to choose, but it might not just have it usually doesn't attain the same level of synergy and build options that the other options present, or it requires more specific building to bring it up to that level.
A tier is great. We love the A tier. This is going to be a weapon master that's useful in every combat encounter, and you should be happy if you have an A tier weapon mastery.
The S tier weapon masteries by Arlights are just incredible. They synergize really well with other options available to the classes that can benefit from them. They synergize with things like spells, feats, other weapon masteries, and many build options that are available for the characters that can use them. And generally, the S tier weapon masteries are ones that are really really good for building a character around.
So, with that, let's get started, and we're going to go through them in alphabetical order here, and we're going to start with Cleave. So Cleave, if you hit a creature with a melee attack roll using this weapon, you can make a melee attack roll with the weapon against a second creature within 5 feet of the first that is also within your reach. On a hit, the second creature takes the weapon's damage, but you don't add your ability modifier to that damage unless that modifier is negative. You can only make this extra attack once per turn. This one applies to the Great Axe and the Halberd.
The first thing to note with this feature is that even though you don't add your strength modifier, or if you were like a warlock, Pact of the Blade, your charisma modifier, to the damage of this weapon, if you have other things that do add to your damage rolls, like you're a raging barbarian, or you have a magic weapon that does extra d6s of damage because it's a vicious weapon or a flame tongue, or it just has an enhancement bonus of some kind that just adds a flat bonus, or you're using Hunter's Mark, or you want a Divine Smite.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, um, so it's still possible to add extra damage to this, just not your ability score bonus. So in this case, that extra attack can hit pretty hard.
Yeah, and I think that especially when you look at low level play, where I think that this is going to come up a lot, because one of the things that happens at low level play is a bunch of little tiny monsters tend to
Yeah.
swarm you guys. And like goblins, oh no, there's 3 goblins based with me at level 3 or 4 is a pretty typical scenario. And so when you have the little minions running around and trying to swarm the barbarian who has the great axe and maybe even has like great weapon master or polearm master, you're going to be using this a ton. And I do have a barbarian right now in my game who has a halberd, who is using this weapon mastery, and they're having a blast with it.
Yeah, I think that you will have a lot of fun with it, especially at those levels where like the Great Axe and the Halberd, the 1d12 Great Axe and the 1d10 Halberd, that's a pretty beefy damage die. So when you're dealing with minion level monsters that have only a handful full of hit points, where their average hit points are less than that damage die, this just feels like getting an extra attack.
Yeah.
Right? In a lot of cases. So that is the case for making this really, really strong. And I think that where this weapon mastery starts to suffer, though, is as you get into higher levels, when you're more often facing multiple monsters or that are just not going to care about the chip damage of a single attack, or when you start facing solo monsters, in which case this is completely irrelevant against solo monsters. And it does kind of get undone by just even the monsters trying to move into a flanking position or spacing out even by 5 feet. Like, it's very easy for tactical monsters to like shut this off.
There are a lot of times that by mid-tier play, instead of fighting a swarm of goblins, you're fighting something like 3 ogres and they don't swarm the same person. Or, you're fighting the wizard, the archers, and the 1 or 2 meat shields. And even then, I do think that it falls off a little bit here because of the fact that you'd probably rather be focus firing in mid to high tier play than
Yeah.
hitting something and then hitting something else for a little bit of damage. And then, it's an extra bonus attack on top of your attacks that you already have. So there's nothing really negative about that. But it does start to tailor off a little bit the higher levels you get.
Yeah, and you can make up for it because what's interesting about this one is that this is made potentially as part of the attack action. So if you have Great Weapon Master, you do get the extra damage from Great Weapon Master to the damage roll as well, right? And so, and again, it works with the Halberd, so we can have a character that is taking Great Weapon Master and Polearm Master. And so if you're using the Halberd with Polearm Master, weaponizing your bonus action attack, you're now getting 4 attacks in, and then as opposed to what would have been 2 initially. And so you can spread those attacks out. It does start to add up to a lot of damage.
So it's actually tough because we need to decide if our rankings are on the raw weapon mastery, which I think they should be, or if we should account for like the builds that you can make, but that's usually where the Bs come in. But I
Yeah.
also think that in general, like this is like on the border for me between B and C.
I agree. Like this is the thing that brings it down for me. It doesn't do anything when you're fighting a solo boss.
Yeah, you don't even have a weapon
Yeah.
mastery in that case.
It and as soon as the monsters start spreading out, it also doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So it is completely reliant on the 2 monsters that you want to deal damage to being side by side. Is that an uncommon situation?
Not really.
No, it's not at all. It's just that
Out of the grand scheme of situations you can find yourself in a combat encounter, it is where other weapon masteries are like, you can use this in this many options. This one is like a very specific.
it just feels like this is one where it's not going to function maybe like 50% of the time.
Now, I will say from practice that is not the case at low levels.
Yes, at low levels it's way better.
At low levels, you're going to be like, how dare you give this such a low ranking? I'm using it in every combat counter all the time. And yes,
Yeah.
I think this is a C, but again, I want to say that the rankings we're giving here feel different than the rankings we've given in other videos, because the C is just saying that this is a niche situation that you're going to experience as you go further in the game. I think that this is an excellent pickup for your weapon mastery when you're starting out a campaign and you're fighting a bunch of minions. I think you're
Yeah.
going to have a blast with it.
I
But
just think that you're taking because it's on the Great Axe and Halberd. I think that you're kind of like, cool, nice perk that I'm getting occasionally. It's not like, oh man, I wanted to build my entire character around this. It was like you were going for the Great Axe and the Halberd because you wanted to take Great Weapon Master and potentially Polearm Master, and you wanted to use a 2-handed weapon.
yeah, this
right?
is the icing on top of the choices that you've already
Yeah.
made. It's not the thing that you're choosing
Yes.
for the purposes of like, oh, I love this weapon mastery.
Exactly. Right? Like
B or C, do you think?
talking it through, especially the synergy with Great Weapon Master and like on the Halberd.
Yeah.
I feel like on the Halberd, it actually gets really good.
I think that B for build, as usual. I personally, that's where I'm leaning.
Yeah.
I do think that because on its own, it's pretty weak and niche. But when you pair it with Great Weapon Master and Halberd, which Great Weapon Master is going to add that damage. So it's no longer like, oh no, I didn't add my strength. It's like,
It's like you did add a Great Weapon Master, a Barbarian with Great Weapon Master that's raging, that's hitting with a Great Axe. It's pretty good.
and my Barbarian, I have to give credit to the Barbarian at my table who, like, I'm throwing, we're level 3 now, which isn't that high, but still, I'm throwing, like, out of the whole party, he's the one getting 2 kills a turn,
Yeah.
whereas others are not. So that's
but
thanks to Cleave.
Once again, I don't think that Cleave is the reason why the Barbarian chose the Great Axe or the Halberd.
Yeah.
I think it's just, fun extra thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where I come down with this one. Now, the direct comparison is Graze. So Graze is on the Great Sword and the Glaive. So almost identical weapons.
2 of my favorite weapons in
Yeah.
the game.
The Great Sword and the Glaive kind of are like the companions to the great axe and the halberd. Like
Yeah.
they're very mechanically similar. So basically the only difference between them is it cleave or graze. So graze, if your attack roll with this weapon misses a creature, you can deal damage to that creature equal to the ability modifier you use to make the attack roll. The damage is the same as the damage type dealt by the weapon, and it can be increased only by increasing the ability modifier. So this is an explicit call out in contrast to Cleave, because Graze is saying the only damage that you ever get on a miss here is your ability score. Like, doesn't matter if your weapon has an enhancement bonus, doesn't matter if your weapon is adding extra d6s. It is just the ability score modifier. So like your +3 flaming greatsword that like your homebrew weapon that does a bunch of, if you're using a greatsword version of Ignatius, you don't get all
You
those
miss and you do 4 damage.
5 if you have 20
Yeah.
strength.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 3 to 5 damage when you miss. Um,
Better than nothing?
Better than nothing, but again, this is one of those cases that I think even more so than Cleave. Where Cleave is like, it's going to feel great at low levels and then it starts to taper off. This one is going to be mildly useful at low levels and then immediately falls flat.
This one will be good against minions and kobolds who
Who are minions?
who automatically die because they took 3 or 4 points of damage.
Yeah, are you fighting monsters that have 3 to 4 hit points? Then Graze is going to feel amazing. When you're fighting a dragon and you miss with your awesome attack with your magic sword and you do 4 damage or 5 damage to it,
It's like whatever.
it's like,
again, it's better than nothing. I've had many cases where a monster got another turn because they had 2 hit points left. Graze in those situations, Graze comes through.
and there's going to be that one time in the campaign where you are fighting the epic boss monster and you hit it and you do 22 damage. And then the next person goes and the DM's like, it only has 1 hit point left, and you roll and you miss.
But
And then you kill it.
with Graze.
That's gonna happen
Yeah.
once. You graze it and kill it.
Yeah.
Congratulations,
And that
you did the
one thing happening does not save this weapon mastery.
I think that this is my D tier weapon mastery.
It's sad because the greatsword is like one of my favorite weapons.
The greatsword is like, this is the thing, is I'm so much more, and I don't realize this until we started comparing these. I'm so much more a sword guy than I am an axe guy.
Yeah.
And I think that
Are you a sword man or an axe man?
I'm definitely a sword man. And yeah, I love me a greatsword. And it's a shame that the weapon mastery for a greatsword is my least favorite because
it's just kind of there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and the thing is that it only happens on a miss. I could actually see someone having this weapon mastery and forgetting that they have it.
Who forgets things like that? I forget it.
Yeah, because you miss. You're used to nothing happening on a miss.
Yeah.
So you got to remember it.
It's like dying and forgetting that you have an ability that brings you back.
Yep, it is. And here's the other ironic thing about it. The more accurate your weapons are, the more accurate your attacks are, the worse this weapon mastery becomes. Because the less it happens.
Yeah.
The more you hit, the less graze occurs.
And like, we're not saying that a bit of extra damage when you miss isn't a good thing. It is. But when you compare it to all the other weapon masteries, which activate so often because they're just happening when you're attacking with the weapon, this is the one weapon mastery that's like, this works when you're not doing well.
And here's the
which
thing.
Hopefully isn't happening as often.
If this weapon mastery was your attacks with this weapon still deal half damage on a miss, it would be a completely different story.
Oh, it'd be S tier.
Yeah, it would be really good. Right?
Or A tier.
Yeah.
Well, we'd have to assess.
We'd still have to assess on that point, but like, then what you could, and I also wonder, like, if there were certain weapons that it was also available on, like if there was even one finesse weapon that had Graze, and then rogues would love it.
Yeah.
Right? Although then it would prompt the question of, does it still work with sneak attack? Right? But yeah, like, I do. I think it's this is the unfortunate thing is I feel like in 2024 if you're taking a glaive or a greatsword, it's because you want the style, the fantasy of using that weapon. I think that Cleave is like, because the weapons are so mechanically similar otherwise, I think that Cleave is better in almost every case.
I definitely, I've always been like, in 2014, Glaive was my favorite polearm. And I think it's probably Halberd or, as we'll see soon, Pike
Yeah.
are just the better options.
All right. Switching to a very different category of weapons, we come to the Nick weapon mastery. This one is a little bit confusing in its wording, but when you make the extra attack of the light property, you can make it as part of the attack action instead of as a bonus action. You can make this extra attack only once per turn, and Nick is available on the dagger, the light hammer, the sickle, and the scimitar.
So what this means is that oftentimes when you are making multiple attacks or you're attacking with more than one weapon specifically, you use your bonus action to attack with your offhand weapon. But if the weapon has the nick property, you free up your bonus action so that you can make both those attacks as a single action on your turn. This is very important for classes who want to dual wield, but want to use their bonus action for other things. This is also really cool because we talked to Jeremy Crawford about this, and if you take the dual wielder feat, you actually now can add in an additional attack as a bonus action on top of moving your regular attack to your main action.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that it's not actually clear how many times you have to use the Nick weapon to activate the mastery, and whether the attack has to be with the Nick weapon or not. Generally, the way that I run it is that the Nick weapon is the offhand weapon,
Yeah.
and so if you're using a short sword, um, the short sword, you attack with the short sword and then you nick with the dagger, right? Oh, there have been a couple people online that have talked about this weird, like, handedness exploit where like a character can have several scimitars and draw a scimitar, attack with the scimitar, drop it, draw another scimitar, attack with the scimitar with nick, while still holding a shield in their offhand. Because like the wording of nick is not worded in a way that like, and the light property is worded in a way that seems to create this loophole where you don't have to be holding a weapon in two different hands.
The classic
Um,
fantasy archetype of single-use weapons.
yeah. If you can find me a dungeon master that's going to allow that, uh, let me know at the next convention, and the round's on me. Um, so, uh,
Now a DM's going to find you at the next convention and be like, I would allow it, and then you have to buy them a drink.
I mean, I will then sit down and be like, "Are you sure?" It just seems it just seems a bad thing.
When people find interpretations like that, to me it's like they're playing with the rules, but they're not actually. I hope they're not actually doing that in the game because that just doesn't feel like it's what the game's
I
about.
mean, it's a direct contradiction to take the rules in good faith,
Yeah.
which is a rule because it's in the Dungeon Master's Guide. The rules are meant to be interpreted in good faith, and that feels like a bad faith interpretation of the rules to me. So the combo with Nick basically is to use any light weapon, or any one-handed light weapon, and then hold a Nick weapon in your offhand and take the dual wielder feat, and you end up and once you get extra attack, you now have a pathway to making 4 attacks per turn by level 5.
This also works though, even if you're not taking the dual wielder feat and you're playing a class or something, you still have to have 2 weapons, but maybe you're playing a class that has a lot of things that they can do with their bonus action, but you still really want to get that attack in because you're holding 2 weapons. So you can attack, and then if you have another awesome feature for your class or subclass that uses your bonus action, you freed that up. And freeing up bonus actions is really, really useful. There's a lot of cases where your bonus action is better used for something else, and the nick property is saying you can still do a bit of extra damage, but you get to do the thing with your bonus action as
Yeah,
well.
like, an interesting thing is, like, if you get the Nick weapon mastery on a monk,
Which monks
you
don't
can
get weapon
still
masteries,
flurry of
but
blows with your bonus action, so
how about the way it combines with like Hunter's Mark on
yeah,
a
or Divine
ranger?
Favor.
Yeah.
right? Or just like even it's not bad dual wielding on a paladin, still using your bonus action to smite. Like not a terrible thing to do, or use divine favor. And so I think the Nick mastery kind of first. So here's the thing: it synergizes with a ton of spells and abilities and class features. Frees up things on the action economy while increasing your damage output. Synergizes with a two-weapon fighting style, and it synergizes with the dual wielding feat. It has a ton of points of synergy. This is A plus, if not S tier.
I definitely,
It also pairs well with the Vex mastery, which we'll talk to in a minute.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I'll give it an A plus.
yeah.
I think it's one of the strongest options out there.
I
Um,
don't know if dual wielding is the strongest damage dealing build. I think the dual wielding paladin is really up there.
yeah,
But
and
I still think that your classic like Polar Master Barbarian might still be kind of throwing down.
yeah, we might see a dual wielding paladin in the future. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah. But yeah, I agree. This is A plus. I think you could make the case for it being S tier. Yeah.
Next up, we come to the push property. If you hit a creature with one of these weapons, which is the Great Club, the Pike, the Warhammer, or the Heavy Crossbow, you can push the creature up to 10 feet straight away from yourself if it is a large or smaller creature. Uh, so I'm going to just come right out and say this. I love the fact that push is on the Heavy Crossbow, and I love the fact that the push can be applied more than once in a single turn.
That is a really key thing with this weapon mastery, is that there's no once per turn limitation on it, which really keys it up, because once you get extra attack involved, once you get additional attacks in the mix, um you now are gaining the capability, like once you have action surge in the mix, you are now gaining the ability to kind of vault someone, just pow.
The Heavy Crossbow fighter,
Yeah.
who is just standing there and has 3 attacks on their turn, and the enemy's like, I'm not afraid. I'm standing 25 feet away from that cliff behind me. And you're just like, boo,
No.
boo, boo.
No.
And they just, you need sharpshooter to boo, boo, boo.
No, you need crossbow
Sorry.
expert,
You,
because
yeah,
the loading
you need
property. Yeah.
crossbow expert
Yeah.
to pow, pow, pow with the heavy crossbow. But the fact that you can knock somebody off a cliff that they weren't even close to on a single turn is great.
I mean, this weapon mastery basically turns the heavy crossbow fighter. They're gonna feel like they're playing with the Eldritch blasting warlocks toys,
Yeah,
right? And I think that's an interesting case for like an Eldritch Knight crossbow fighter that does use their spells to create damaging areas.
because you can create a damaging,
Yeah.
like a wall of fire, and then just keep shooting people through the wall of fire.
Or the other one that's really good is the Ranger with spike growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's brutal.
I really like this image that I have of this dwarf ranger with the heavy crossbow who
Yeah.
creates the spike growth, and it's just pff, pff. And so the heavy crossbow is a huge winner here for me. I also think the pike is the other big winner here for me, because okay, both of these fulfill a strong fantasy for me.
Yeah.
The heavy crossbow feels like it's the shotgun of fantasy, and it should knock people off their feet. It should knock them
Yeah,
back.
it's like you're carrying this little ballista.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the pike being able to like jam it into an enemy and push them
Yeah, you're
off of
driving them
you.
back just like a pike would historically. Yeah.
So both of those have this weapon mastery has brought the fantasy for those weapons to life. I will say the Great Club and Warhammer also fill the fantasy of the like that scene in
Windmill slam.
well, it's the beginning of Lord of the Rings when Sauron comes into the like kind of walks into the troops and hits them,
Yeah.
and you just see them all go. Pff. It's obviously not that powerful, but I just love the idea of whacking somebody with a Great Club or Warhammer and them like flying.
Okay, can we make the observation here that the push weapon mastery is available on a ranged weapon, a reach weapon, a one-handed weapon, and a two-handed weapon?
Yeah,
So
any
whether you want to
any
go,
play style.
yeah, it fits with so many different play styles. Battlefield control, it's hard to quantify battlefield control, but the fact that it works with a bunch of different play styles, it applies multiple times and synergizes with extra attack or abilities that will grant you extra attacks like action surge. the fact that it will then play nicely with the feats that you want for those weapons. Because also remember that the Great Club and the Warhammer are bludgeoning weapons.
So if you take,
The bludgeoner feat,
you're adding 5 extra feet.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
man.
yeah. So there's a bunch of really nice synergies that are loaded into.
I will admit that when I'm thinking of my next character concept, the push option is just so fun that I
Yeah.
actually have a hard time deciding whether the dual wielder with Vex and Nick is the way to go.
And think with the Warhammer, you go with a shield, you can grab Shield Master. So that you've got the shove on the shield, right? So like you've now got the ability with the Warhammer when you pair it with the shield, knock someone prone, push them back.
I
Yeah,
mean, I even like the idea of playing a character that has a pike and a heavy crossbow for situations.
that there's something about that feels like something that you'd see in like a mercenary regiment, right? Of like this regiment of like mercenaries that they all have their pikes and they have like the Pavis style. There's no Pavis style shields in D&D 5e, but like the shields that kind of like get fixed down on the ground and then the crossbow
Yeah.
goes over it,
And
and then
so you're
there's the second line behind them with the pikes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I don't know which way to go. I think this is definitely an A plus weapon mastery. I think it's one of the best ones out there.
yeah.
Um
It's not straight damage, it's battlefield control, but
which
but
is
I
excellent.
it is. Yeah.
It's hard to quantify again, but I think that the push weapon mastery is one of the best ones, and I'm torn. And so tell me what I should play next. Is it
Yeah.
push or is it the Vex neck?
Man, I really do like the Warhammer and Shield with taking like all the for like
I just want
that
to
that character feels like a bully. You know what I mean?
I just want a heavy crossbow like we're sieging a castle or something
Yeah.
and there's all the people on the walls and I just want to hit them and hear the Wilhelm screams as they fall off of
Yeah.
their perches.
I think there's so many good build options. I think that they're all really strong. I don't think that I think that the cool thing about all these, especially the pike and the heavy crossbow one, is that the damage potential is there too, right? And then with the Warhammer and shield build, you've got a really like playing that on a dwarf, you've got like a really classic like line breaker style
Yeah.
character there too. Um I feel like I feel like the excitement that I have with these builds makes me want to give push S tier, but I don't. Like, does it go, like, is it that raw, like, on papers? Like, it's such a weird kind of soft power,
Yeah.
the push.
And I think that we're just excited about the prospect because we love fantasizing our character concepts. I do think it's an A tier,
Yeah.
because I don't think it's like overpowering anything. And I think, you know, the situations where you get to shoot somebody off of something or pike them off a ledge are actually going to be a somewhat niche thing that will happen, but it's not going to happen all the time.
Well, here's what I'll say. If you are unfortunately stricken with a dungeon master that generally has you fighting in featureless dungeon rooms or flat open plains where there isn't a lot of terrain to interact with, and where you have, or again, against solo enemies that have a lot of movement themselves, against enemies that have their own ability to fly, so they're not really worried about getting pushed off a cliff. There are situations where, and sometimes you just need to grind it out,
Hmm.
and the push isn't going to do much for you, right? So that there are circumstances where the environment is not at play. Generally speaking, I find battlefields like I think we have a bias for the push mastery because generally we like creating those sort of set piece battles where the environment is incredibly relevant.
Yeah.
And so as soon as the environment becomes relevant and as soon as you have party members that can create those battlefield control effects, the push mastery elevates itself and definitely becomes S tier.
I do have one more point though, that even if you're playing in like a flat featureless room, uh, you still get to, I think it's excellent on a protector build.
Yeah,
Because let's say that an enemy gets up to your squishy mage.
yeah,
You can come up, smack them away, and then impose yourself between them.
That is like the White Room sort of use case
Yeah.
for this, right? Of being able to just get that raw positional advantage, which I would say that comes up, but it doesn't excite me in the same way that
No, but it's a very
yeah,
useful, and I'm thinking like my next character is supposed to be a protector, so maybe that
yeah.
is the way to go. Next up we come to Sap. If you hit a creature with this weapon, that creature has disadvantage on its next attack roll before the start of your next turn. This is going to work on the mace, the spear, the flail, the war pick, the longsword, and the morning star. That's a lot of weapons.
It is. It's a lot of one-handed weapons that deal 1d8 damage.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is a decent option for sword and board defender type characters. It's also cool on a thrown spear.
Yeah.
I just don't think it excites me nearly as much as the Warhammer and Shield
I
with
mean,
push.
okay, I'm going to say that Sap again is almost the other side of the coin to push. And the same way that Cleave was the kind of the better, stronger, faster brother to Graze, this feels like Push is the bigger, stronger, faster, better brother to Sap.
Interestingly enough, it's going to be good in a bunch of situations where push isn't,
True.
right? Like against that big old dragon that is a huge monster that you can't push. Another limitation to push that doesn't work on huge and gargantuan monsters. So against that huge dragon that you can't push, that is just there,
I mean,
zapping it to give it disadvantage on its attacks might be. It's only one attack though, and it doesn't apply. Like if you hit it multiple times, it doesn't give it the disadvantage on multiple attack.
giving disadvantage out, though, is pretty awesome.
Also
This,
pretty common.
true. Um, I don't think by any means that this is a bad weapon mastery. I don't think it's as cool as Push, which already makes me consider that it should be lower than Push. But when you hit somebody and they have disadvantage on their next attack, you're increasing the likelihood of swinging the damage of that combat in your favor.
Yeah,
Every time you hit a creature, you are swinging the combat in your favor using Sap.
yeah.
And so I do think that this is at the very least a B.
I agree. I agree. And I do think I personally think that again, most characters have multiple weapon masteries. And sap and push, hey, you know what? If you're a character that's going to carry imagine a dwarf fighter with a war pick and a warhammer. Very dwarfy feeling. And this is one of the nice things about weapon mastery, and this is one of those cases where carrying two weapons and switching between sap and push is actually really cool.
Yeah, this really does bring up the playstyle of like having more than one weapon and like choosing the right one for the job.
Yeah.
And yeah, playing a dwarf with a war pick and a warhammer is so
Yeah,
good.
because that's where the fact that most characters get two weapon masteries or more if you're a fighter and can have mastery with multiple weapons does mean that you can tailor to the situation. And I think that this is where the sap mastery really comes into its own, right? Where it's like, all right, it's going to be useful, right? And now we're just going to switch over to it and have that as our backup, right? I think for a character that is going the Warhammer route wants push. I think that this is that having sap with another weapon is a good thing to carry in your back pocket. It's not something that I think I would do with like the greatsword glaive thing. Like I think with the greatsword glaive situation, I would be choosing other secondary weapon masteries before I went to the other two-handed weapon.
So
Right?
are we comfortable with a B for this guy?
I think we are.
Okay. Moving on to slow, which I'm going to actually erase what I said about sap and say that slow is actually the appropriate brother to push.
Yeah.
If you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to it, you can reduce its speed by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. If the creature is hit more than once by weapons that have this property, the speed reduction doesn't exceed 10 feet. This is going to apply to the club, the javelin, the sling, the light crossbow, the whip, the longbow, and the musket.
So the key thing here is that with the exception of the club and the javelin is already a thrown weapon, Slow is mostly found on ranged weapons.
Yeah, which is cool because you get to stall the enemy getting up to you.
Yeah.
Which I think this is why this is the more appropriate brother to push, is push forces enemies back, where slow stops them coming forward. But this is where the difference is. For me, pushing somebody into something is a way better tactic than slowing somebody getting up to you.
Yes, in a large enough arena, you can do a thing where you shoot someone and slow them by 10 feet and move away, and then they'll never be able to get up to you,
True. There is
right?
also a situation where you lay down spike growth between you and the enemy and then hit them with slow as they're entering.
Yeah, and then they have to trudge through it even longer,
Yeah,
right? It actually doesn't do more damage to them in that case because
true.
slow it just
Okay, it might be better, let's say, for like if a wizard had put down like sickening radiance or
yeah,
something, then
yeah,
or hunger of Hadar from a warlock, you hit them and they're now having a harder time getting out of that.
totally. I think that slow is kind of like a default that you end up with because I don't think many characters are going to want to use a club as their primary melee option. If you could avoid it, I think a lot of characters are going to carry javelins as a backup thrown weapon, which makes this a decent choice for like your secondary
Yeah,
option. And then I think it really comes down to slow is what you kind of are stuck with if you want to use a longbow.
yeah.
Or if you, because again, I can't really see a character choosing a light crossbow with their weapon mastery. I think that a lot of characters that have access to that weapon are going to choose something else. The whip's also a bit of an odd duck in here, I feel, as well.
I actually think the light crossbow is one of the weakest weapons in the game.
The light crossbow is a weapon that is used by characters that don't get weapon mastery,
Yeah.
right? Like it is the backup weapon for a bunch of characters that don't get anything else,
And
right?
I mean, musket is dependent on your campaign.
Yeah.
Club is not a great weapon. Whip is really, if you're picking a whip, it's because you really want to use a whip.
Yeah, and I think what this boils down to is that a lot of I think the most of the time you're going to see the slow weapon mastery being chosen is someone took it on a javelin as a backup weapon, or you've got a longbow based ranged character that didn't want to take sharpshooter and crossbow expert and go with a heavy crossbow,
Right.
right? Wanted to save themselves taking a feat. So I don't think it's bad. It's not a bad mastery. I just think that it's not on a it's kind of what makes it not great is that it's on not great weapons.
The only two weapons that I actually see here that are worth talking about are javelin and longbow.
Yeah.
And javelin is still going to be your secondary option for like a fighter because they need something to throw.
Yeah.
Um, and the longbow is going to be the go-to option for those who don't want to use crossbows, and are ranged combatants.
And I do think that like look at if you have a ranger with a longbow that takes a bunch of speed boosting feats and uses the slow mastery to slow their foes down, they're just going to be able to run circles around an enemy, pelting them with arrows. And their enemy, even if they, like, in some cases, if their speed is 30 feet, and if you, as the ranger, are like, let's say you're like an elf ranger with the speedy feat as well. So you've got like a 45 movement speed against an enemy with a 30-foot movement speed that gets slowed by one of your attacks. Even if they dash, they're never going to be able to get up to you.
Yeah, and I still do think that although it doesn't play as well with damaging areas as push, it still could play with damaging areas in an interesting way. And so there are cases here where slow is going to be really useful on the battlefield. And so I think I'm going to give it a B.
Yeah.
It's not as powerful as push, but it's not a bad choice at all.
So next up is Topple. If you hit a creature with this weapon, you can force the creature to make a Constitution saving throw. The DC is 8, plus the ability used to make the attack, plus your proficiency bonus. And on a failed save, the creature falls prone. This mastery is available to quarterstaffs, battle axes, lances, mauls, and tridents. So once again, we have a really interesting spread here because we've got a simple weapon, we've got a one-handed martial weapon, we've got the lance, which is a bit of a unique one because of the way it's a reach weapon that can be used mounted. The maul, which is our go-to two-hander. And then finally, we have it on the trident, which is a thrown weapon.
What's really interesting about Topple is that it is the only weapon mastery that requires a saving throw, and I have to give it a negative point for that. But everything else about it is awesome. Again, a wide array of weapons
Yeah.
available to it. But what is interesting is, yes, it requires a saving throw, but there's no limit to once per turn on the Topple Mastery. So if I have multiple attacks, I can have the creature make multiple saving throws until I knock them over. And knocking a creature over and knocking them prone means that if I manage to do it on my first attack, or if I'm the fighter or barbarian with a topple weapon, and the other fighter slash barbarian slash monk slash whatever melee combatant is also up there with me, I've now set them up to also get advantage on all their attacks.
Yep.
So you can actually, by using topple, even though it demands a saving throw, has a good chance of setting up a string of advantage attacks against a target.
Where Topple gets really interesting is with characters that can do tricky things with weapon masteries. I'm talking about the World Tree Barbarian and the Fighter, because fighters eventually get that feature that lets them swap masteries around. I think they only get to choose from Sap, Slow, and Push, but they can kind of always change any weapon to one of those masteries on a whim. And it means that with both the World Tree Barbarian and fighters, you now get this ability where you can knock someone prone and push them.
Yeah.
And that becomes a really, really effective 1-2 punch when you're able to do that. And so now that's a barbarian and fighter specific sort of, actually a World Tree Barbarian and fighter specific sort of maneuver there, unless you're doing things like weapon swapping, which is also another option there. I think that you can also do an interesting thing with the Maul, because the Maul will combine with the Crusher feat as well. So you can topple someone with the Maul, push them 5 feet.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think that I think that there's actually a lot of play here with Topple. And um if it was limited to once per turn, it would be a way worse weapon mastery,
Yeah.
but because it isn't, I'm not even upset that it requires a saving throw, because you're causing a creature, you're basically, if you're a fighter who makes 2, 3, or 4
Or
attacks
more.
or more, you can really bank on the fact that you're going to knock a creature over at some
Yeah,
point.
because if you knock them prone with Topple and then you go to town with Action Surge, I mean, we see that with the Battle Master too. This
Yeah.
is another weapon mastery where like the Battle Master features really start to take this into overdrive too. I think actually Push is another one that the Battle Master takes into overdrive too. And so I think that you get a lot of synergy that can be built around here, but it's also just useful on the table. Like, I think, personally speaking, the Trident, because it's a thrown weapon that knocks prone, the Trident is an A plus or maybe even S tier backup weapon for a ground-based melee character to have an option of they can throw that Trident at a flying enemy and knock them out of the sky.
Yeah.
And so everybody's like, that is a tool that just any melee character has in their back pocket. And so for that reason, I think that a lot of melee characters, it's within their interest to carry a Trident with them just to throw at flying enemies.
Yeah, I think that this is an A.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of options here. Finally, we come to Vex. If you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to the creature, you have advantage on your next attack roll against that creature before the end of your next turn. This works with the rapier, the short sword, the blowgun, the hand crossbow, the pistol, the dart, the short bow, and the hand axe.
So rogues just fell in love.
This is the one for rogues because you can basically, if you're in a situation where you do not have sneak attack, you can use a weapon to give yourself sneak attack on your next attack.
Yeah.
Now,
and then you can keep rolling it forward.
This might make the case for like a dual wielder rogue, because then you can give yourself sneak attack and then attack with like a dagger, and it doesn't matter if it's,
Vex and Nick is like peanut butter and jelly. Right? It's like wine and cheese. It's like, it is the pairing.
A burger and cheese.
Burger and fries.
Many things in cheese.
Many things in cheese.
It's like cheese.
Yeah, it is, and it is a pretty cheesy weapon mastery. I think it's probably the clearest in a vacuum. It's probably the clearest S tier weapon mastery.
I'll give Vex the S.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're using Nick and Vex together, then Nick is also S because together
Yeah.
they're crazy. But I just think Vex, it's advantage on a stick, and
It's never not going to work.
it's on a lot of weapons that people who want advantage and can't necessarily always generate it themselves
Yeah.
are going to be using.
Hmm.
Um, Mainly rogues.
Yep.
I think that Vex is perfect for rogues, but it's perfect for anybody who's dual wielding because giving yourself advantage on your next attack and then landing the nick attack and then making a third attack.
Yeah.
It's a good 3-punch system.
Yep.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. Like, I think that it's also just not hard to use. Like, just a character that just wants to have advantage with a short bow,
Yeah.
constantly just plink away with that thing. There's there's no there's no kind of situational inputs involved with it. It's just straight up, here, have advantage. Um, and I guess the only time where it isn't useful is where you've got the ability to get advantage really easily otherwise. But now Vex just makes it so easy to get advantage
Yeah.
when you really want it. That it really makes it stand out, I think, over a lot of the other ones as a very straight up damage increase. So I agree with you. I think it gets the S from me. I think that the fact that push and topple are my other like top three. Combine
Yes.
like Vex and Nick kind of feel like
Like
they're,
one.
yeah, like they're one. There's two
Yeah.
sides of the same coin.
But Vex, Nick, Push, Topple,
Yeah, give me more. Give me more.
those are the four that
Yeah,
I would definitely steer towards using more often.
yeah. I think that you'll see slow and sap as like secondary options for sort of sword and board characters in the case of sap, or like range weapon users that have no other better option for slow. And I think that you'll see Cleave get taken for your two-handers.
Yeah. And Graze is because somebody wasn't caring about weapon masteries.
Yeah. And I
They
just
were caring more about the
I
weapon.
just think with Graze, it's like you wanted to have um
A great sword.
a great sword, but like the comparison of like what is going to do more for your damage and overall, like when you're looking at the great sword, the maul, and the great axe, like it's really,
And it upsets me because the great sword is always my fantasy. I
yeah.
prefer that image.
One of the interesting things is that Topple doesn't have a size restriction,
Yeah,
right?
you can topple anything.
You can topple anything over with it. It knocks it prone, right? So like that's where I do think that, if you're choosing between like what is your two-handed weapon of choice, right? I think that if you want to have cleave, your backup weapon is either going to be a pike if you're going with the reach weapon, or it's going to be a maul if you're going with the basic two-hander.
Yeah. I think that overall, the weapon masteries are a great addition to the game, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of good choices here. And even the ones that we gave B and some of the ones we gave C to, I think are still like great additions
Yeah.
to using your weapons. If you look on screen right now, these are the final rankings that we gave. Should be up there. And yeah, I'm wondering if people out there have different opinions. I feel like this is kind of the consensus that I've seen from most people out there on the internet.
Hmm.
That Vex and Nick are the ones that are mostly talked about. Push and Topple are talked about a lot.
And the other ones are just kind of there.
The other ones are there.
Yeah.
So I am interested. Do you have differing opinions? Do you think that there are other standout options amongst the weapon masteries? And are there any sort of combinations that maybe we didn't talk about in this video that you found that make some of these weapon masteries really pop? I think the weapon masteries are such a cool addition to the game, and I'm excited to dig more into the nuance of how they can play at the table. So let us know all that in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. We have some awesome rewards for our Patreon supporters that you can check out, including access to all of our YouTube videos 1 week before they drop here on YouTube, as well as cool new game content and packets that we drop every month for our Patreon supporters, and exclusive actual plays as well. You can find all that by following the links down below.
And if you want to see us playing some D&D, we have our actual play in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings right here on YouTube. You can check out all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we've got plenty more coverage on the new 2024 rules right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time in the dungeon.